Hello and welcome to the Green Truth podcast by TICU, your go-to destination for insightful conversations on sustainability. We're committed to delving into diverse perspectives on environmental issues, guided by the belief that embracing truth empowers us to create a better world for generations to come. I'm Chantal Kerr-Shepherd, your host, and today I'm joined by Caitlin Southwick, founder and CEO at Key Culture and Key Futures. Thank you for joining us, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for having me, Chantal. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So can you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to work in sustainability? Because I don't think it's a normal route I've heard of.
No, it's definitely not. So I am actually an art conservator by training. And yes, that is a job. Basically, we're like art doctors. So if there's a broken or dirty statue, you can call me in and I can fix it. And I loved my job. I have to say, I've done some of the coolest things that you can do as an art conservator. I've worked at the Getty Conservation Institute. I've worked at both the Uffizi Galleries and the Vatican Museums. I was part of the first team of conservators to go down to Rapa Nui and work on the Moai statues.
Awesome.
So I've had, thanks. I've had quite a enriching cultural experience in my job. And while I loved everything that I was doing, I also am a mountain girl. I'm originally from Colorado, and I love this beautiful planet we live on. And for me, it was just basically a misalignment of my moral and ethical compass with my day job. Standing on the beaches of Rapa Nui, dumping toxic chemicals over the Moai and watching it run into the ground and out into the ocean just turned my stomach. So really for me, it was, how can I make my everyday work more sustainable? How can I start integrating environmental responsibility into my day job? And I really couldn't find anything. And when I started looking around, I realized that, first of all, I was not the only cultural professional with this question, but also started realizing that there are incredible opportunities not only to help improve the work of the cultural sector, but also the opportunities that the cultural sector presents in terms of advocating and empowering and educating our audiences and our communities.
That's brilliant. And what changes have you made? So you say you recognize the need for change in culture and cultural institutions. So what did you do? How do you go from, this is my day job, it's not contributing to the planet? How do you change that thought into action?
That's a really good question. And that was my first one. What am I actually going to do? And I started looking around and realized that everyone else had the exact same question. And to be honest, I don't think that this is just relevant to the cultural sector. I think this is how we all feel. A lot of us are personally passionate about sustainability. And, we go home and we recycle, we, reuse, we are conscientious about the lights, but when we go to the office, it's a completely different scenario. We might not think about how our work impacts the climate in a larger sense. And this was kind of a question that once I started asking it, I realized a lot of people had similar questions and had been thinking about this as well. Like, okay, yes, I'm responsible at home, but I don't know how to transfer that into my day job because I'm not taught how to do that. And it's not part of my job description. So what does this actually mean? So really for me, it was first starting to ask the right questions, figuring out, what is it that is detrimental about my work and where can improvements be made? And when it came down to it, it was really a lot about education. I fully believe that education is empowerment. I believe also that, humans are good and we make the best decisions we can with the information that we have. And if we don't have the right knowledge, then we're not going to be able to make the right choice. I always tell the story of when I was a little girl and I grew up in the United States. And when you'd go to the grocery store, they would bag your groceries for you. And they would ask, do you want paper or plastic? And I remember my mom told me when I was about 4 that they had to cut down trees in the forest to make the paper bags. And I was very upset by this. And I thought, that's terrible. Like, I don't want them cutting down the forests. So I very proudly stand up and say, I want plastic because I want to save the planet.
Nice.
And of course, looking back on that now, that was obviously the wrong decision, but that was the knowledge that I had at the time. That was the information I had. And, I think that to this day, it's the same thing. If we are empowered with the right information, the right data, the right knowledge, then we can make informed decisions. And I think we all want to make those decisions. So for me, the first part was just educating myself. It was learning a little bit about, what is sustainability and what does it mean? What is circular economy? What is climate change? What is this all, what are the implications here? And then kind of making those connections. But what I really saw was that there was this gap between desire and action. And that
Yeah.
really did come down to information. So, what we do at Key is basically provide the information, the resources, the methodologies, the processes, and a lot of hand holding for implementing sustainable practice in the cultural sector.
And where do you start? What are some of those practices that you want cultural institutions to implement?
That's a great question. I mean, to be honest, if you're looking at the cultural sector, almost everyone starts with materials. Art is, well, I mean, not always material, but a lot of it is very tangible. And of course, materials are an easy entry point into the larger sustainability conversation because it's something that we're interacting with every day. It's something that we can see, and it's something that we therefore are aware of. For me, I was walking by the trash can at my conservation studio one day, and I looked inside and it was just full of disposable nitrile gloves. And I thought, well, this is so wasteful. Like, can't we recycle these or something? And started looking into recycling programs for nitrile gloves. Couldn't find any information for conservators. I finally ended up finding a recycling program through the University of Edinburgh's chemistry department.
Okay.
And,
Far.
yeah. So once again, looking outside the sector, thinking outside the box, and realize that there are solutions. Maybe just people in the cultural sector don't know them, because to be honest, we tend to be a little overlooked. We're kind of a niche market. A lot of people think that okay, it's culture, it's museums, it's art, it's obviously already doing good. But what was so shocking to me is that a lot of people don't realize that museums are huge culprits when it comes to energy consumption. I worked at a conservation lab that used 3 times more energy than a hospital.
Wow.
And yeah.
Okay.
A lot of museums are actually some of the most, and I'm sorry, museums, I love you all, but museums can be the most polluting buildings in a city
Really?
because of how much they're running their HVAC systems. And one of the biggest conversations right now in the cultural sector is around this issue of climate control, because it can, 60 to 70% of a museum's energy can be from trying to maintain these incredibly strict standards of temperature and relative humidity, which for the last 50 years has been in the name of preservation of materials.
Yeah.
You don't want to have, your paintings start melting because it's too hot in your museum. But over the last 20 years, we've come to realize that actually those standards are not necessary, and we can be much more flexible with our temperature and relative humidity. So we've started a program called Getting Climate Control Under Control, where we're helping walk museums through the process of updating their climate control conditions. We're already seeing savings of 50% or more in Denmark. And basically it's just a win-win solution, because it's better for people, better for the planet, better for our wallets, and also it's a way that we can take really tangible action. So it's interesting. This is kind of circling back, but there's a lot of really small things that tend to get overlooked. But when it comes to the practical matters of this, oftentimes it's things that we just haven't had a conversation about because we've never thought about it.
Yeah, and you don't know the impacts that it's going to have, again, coming back to the knowledge point as well. And
exactly,
you mentioned the climate control of museums. That's something that's clearly been really ingrained, and much like the wider climate conversation, changing behavior when people are so used to the way things are must be incredibly challenging. How do you combat that?
That's a really good question. And I have to say, it's not always easy. But honestly, the way that we found the most effective way for changing behavior is to do it collectively. It's through collaboration. And so when we started embarking on this climate control conversation, I was really looking at, why are people using outdated standards? Because we have 20 years worth of scientific data showing that we don't need to be using these really strict conditions. We can use much more climate friendly solutions, let's say. But no one was making the changes. And I was absolutely frustrated about why. I mean, you can save not only massive amounts of energy and carbon, but a ton of money. The
Yeah.
Guggenheim Bilbao in Spain, they updated their conditions. They went from plus or minus one to, or I'm sorry, plus or minus two to plus or minus 5 degrees on their temperature ranges. And they saved €20,000 a month on their energy
Wow.
bill.
So it
And it's
seems
like,
like an obvious thing to do then.
exactly. It's such an obvious thing. And especially, if museums are saying like, oh, we don't have budgets, Well, guess what? If you're flushing it down the drain while you're, spending it with the energy company, then I think we're just actually not allocating our resources very well. So let's revisit this. But indeed, it was really about the behavior change. It was kind of this attitude of like, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
You don't want to put collections at risk. If it's working right now, why would you make the changes? But the fact of the matter is that it was broken. I mean, maybe it wasn't broken from a preservation perspective, but it's certainly broken from a financial perspective, and even more so broken from a climate perspective. So the biggest barriers to this change was indeed, it was a behavior issue, but it was mostly because we were looking at our peers. And it's very difficult for one museum to make an update or make a change because of loan agreements. So if Museum A wants to borrow something from Museum B will say, well, you have to, keep X, Y, and Z conditions. So Museum A will say, well, we can't update because then we can't borrow things from Museum B. And of course, this means that in order for either one of these museums to change their climate control, they have to do it together, because they have to be both on the same page so that they can still loan art objects. And then, of course, no one wants to look unprofessional. And a lot of the conversations in the past 20 years have been about, they're calling it relaxing your standards or loosening or widening parameters. And that doesn't sound good.
No, it
No museum
doesn't.
wants to say
It
like,
sounds
yeah,
weak.
like, oh yeah, we're relaxing our standards on preservation. We don't care about taking care of your objects. No, of course not. That's crazy. Like, obviously, museums are there to preserve and protect cultural heritage. So we want to do it in the best way. So instead of talking about relaxing your standards or increasing your ranges, we started talking about updating your practices. So through this semantics change and through this collaborative approach where we were getting everyone working together and on the same page, all of a sudden we have behavior change. So collaboration for us was 100% the key. And we started this program in Denmark where we were working with the Danish Museum Association Green Academy and 10 of their member museums. And over the course of the last year, we've seen everyone come together, working together, collaborating, contributing collectively. And it's just, I mean, the entire game has changed in the country. So it really has been the most important aspect.
So you've started with a case study to show other organizations what can be done.
Yeah, I would call it a pilot. But indeed, it was, and the idea was that, we could show how this could be done in terms of the methodology, but it was also just about those conversations and those connections between individuals within the institutions, but also between peers across museums. And it's had nationwide impact. I mean, it's absolutely staggering, not only how successful it's been on an institutional scale, but also how successful it's been on a national scale. Denmark now has new loan agreements and new practices for climate control as well as lending. And it's just opened up not only so many doors in terms of everyone being able to update their climate conditions, but also in terms of lending to institutions that previously wouldn't be considered because they didn't have, the proper HVAC systems or, the right parameters. So from a social perspective, it's also become more accessible and inclusive.
Brilliant. And what has it kind of spread a bit more globally? And what other impacts have you had aside from the climate control conversation?
Well, we're very excited about that. We are actually launching our next cohort in France in October, which is going to be in collaboration with ICOM France. And we're currently working on a cohort in Sweden. We also have some institutions in North America that have joined, and we're looking to continue and advance another cohort in the United States in the fall this year. So we're starting to build out more and more programs of this. It's a proven methodology now. And I think in the next 2 years, every museum in the world will have updated their climate control, and that they'll be proud of it and want to talk about it.
That's a massive aim. Do you think there are going to be any big challenges, any key organisations that might not want to make the change, or do you think it all comes down to communication?
Yeah, it's what's so interesting about this is that when I first started this project, I thought, okay, I'm going to have to get the big players on board. You know, I need to talk to the British Museum. I need to talk to Tate, V&A. I need to talk to, like, you know, the Met, all of these guys. And when I approached them, I had mixed responses. There was a couple that said we're already doing it, although that was not backed by any evidence.
Classic.
There were a couple, yeah, there were a couple that said, you know, no. And there were a couple that said like this, you know, that just didn't respond. So it was a really mixed bag. And I found that actually, um, when it came to saying yes and making the commitment, it was much, much easier when it was a group rather than one at a time. So of course, after I was, you know, trying to get the big players on board, I went to the Danish Museum Association and I told them about this. And I said, we would love to do this. And they brought on their museums. And then I pitched it to all of their museums. And then, you know, they were all on the same page. They were literally all on the same call. So it was a much easier yes, because it was a collective yes rather than an individual yes. Yeah, I think when it comes to the barriers and the challenges on this, there's a lot of different elements. One of the biggest problems I've seen with sustainability in general is that people feel like it's an add-on, that it's
Yeah.
something extra, that it's more work. And one of the questions I get when it comes to, or I get two main questions whenever I'm talking about this project. The first one is, how much does it cost?
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting because I'm like, I'm going to save you a massive amount of money. But we all know that the investment, sometimes people are a little bit short-term thinking, short-sighted, I want to say, but that's a little mean. So shorter term thinking in terms of budgets and not looking at the long-term impact. But the other thing is time. And everybody in the world, this is particularly true of the cultural sector, but I've been told that this is true for everyone. We're all overworked. We're all exhausted. We're all busy. And so how do you make time for this? And when I talk to people about this type of work, they say, well, how much time is it going to take?
Yeah.
And, you know, I have this whole idea right now. I just want everyone to like stop and make 1 hour a week for sustainability. That's it. Because I know it does take a little bit of investment. It's not something you can just, you know, put on your sustainability glasses and then voila, you see everything in a new light, and it's all like, oh, there's an opportunity for sustainability. There's one, and you know what to do. Like you do have to invest. You have to take the time to learn to look at things with that sustainability lens, and you have to learn to see things with, you know, the circular economy viewpoint or whatever it is. So it really is about getting people to make time for it and getting people to see the long-term impact and consequently not flinch at, you know, a budget situation. So I think for me, those have been the two biggest issues. And I don't know what the solution is. I mean, you know, with the climate control project, it's been incredibly successful. And so showing the case studies and showing how it can happen is really motivating. But you know, it still is taking time to convince people like this is something that you should invest your time in. So I think that, yeah, I'd love to hear if anyone has any suggestions on how to get people to make time for this stuff, but it's important.
I think we're all battling the same issue when it comes to sustainability. It's not sexy, is it? Because
Well, see, we have to make it
yeah.
sexy. I have to say, climate control is probably the most unsexy thing that you can talk about. No, seriously. I mean, how hot is it to talk about temperature and relative humidity, you know, regulated by HVAC systems? Oh, baby. It's like the most dry topic ever. And like, I love all my facilities managers out there, but they know what I'm talking about. Like trying to get people to listen to you when you're talking about these things is just, people glaze over because it's technical. It's not really, it's behind the house. It's not, you know, especially cultural institutions. And I was the keynote at the Canadian Museum Association annual conference this year. And I got up on stage and I said, guys, I'm going to talk to you about the sexiest thing ever. climate control. Just like burst out laughing because it's not, but sustainability can be sexy. And I think that's another key to it, is like showing that it can be fun. And for me, this is what's been so exciting about the climate control pilot, is that, okay, yeah, climate control, not the sexiest thing. A lot of people, I think another reason, that people aren't engaging or haven't engaged in the past is more an inertia thing. It's like, it's on the agenda. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. But, other things come up. But it's really interesting, because when you start showing people how it can be done and celebrating those successes and getting people excited about it, and then they want to be a part of it, it's, I always say it's like, the way to get people to join the sustainability party is not to like force them, but to make the sustainability party so much fun that they want to come join it. We're still working on that part, but I'm hoping that we're getting there.
It's a key marketing thing, FOMO sells.
Totally.
But you've got to get people on the, like said, to start the party. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think you're right. Collaboration is the key to success. So drawing on that, what have been your biggest successes so far with Key Culture and Key Futures?
Well, the climate control pilot obviously has been a lot of fun. It's been an interesting journey, because when I first started, so I started Key Culture as a nonprofit, and there were a lot of reasons for that. First of all, because I thought, well, this is a brilliant idea, so it's going to be super easy to get funded. So I just started it one day. I finished my doctorate, and the next day I started it, because I was like, the faster I get started, the faster I'm going to be able to make impact. So, no financial backing, no knowledge of how to run a nonprofit, just me. And I hired an assistant with my personal savings, and that was it.
Brilliant.
So it was a really interesting way to get started. But I think, what has been so exciting about it along the journey is how global it has become and how much input we've been able to receive. I mean, so Key Culture actually was founded November of 2019, and we became a nonprofit in January of 2020. And that was horrible timing from a financial perspective. Even if there were people who wanted to fund me, no one was going to during COVID. But the silver lining of all of this was, while we didn't have any money, there was a lot of people sitting at home bored, wanting to get involved with something interesting. And all of a sudden, here comes this new organization that's working in the nexus of sustainability and culture. And that's kind of fun and interesting. And who's heard of that, like, weird little partnership? And all of a sudden, before I knew it, we had 150 volunteers from all over the globe giving us input on what would be useful for them or what their expertise is. And, and all of a sudden we were building things. And,
amazing.
In 2020, we were able to put together the Key books, which are step-by-step guides on how to be sustainable. We did it completely voluntarily based. So it was content written, created, designed, the website, everything was done with volunteers.
Wow.
But what was so great about it was that, there were dozens of people working on each of these. And that diverse perspective and that global input made them so valuable. So, for me, it's been not just a journey of the outputs and, what programs we've been able to successfully implement, but it's also just been this incredible journey of bringing people together and starting these conversations. And even to this day, when I go to a conference and people come up to me and say, like, I love what you do. Thank you so much. Like, this is something I've always been really passionate about, but never knew what to do. And I'm like, that was me. I get it. But I think, yeah, exactly. I'm like, come be my friend. And I think that's what's so exciting, is that it is like, basically we started a party and it's become this huge thing. And of course, out of Key Culture came Key Futures, which is our action branch, I call it. It's, that's where we provide the services, the programming, and really walking people through the tangible steps. And we run the climate control pilot there, as well as other programming and a lot of focus on educational aspects and professional development. But it's really, I think, as you said, like the collaboration element on both sides, the inside outside model of like bringing collaboration and co-creation into what we do, and then being able to also utilize that approach in order to make the programming successful.
That's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And you must have got so many competitors together as well to make change.
That's really interesting. I have to say this is one of the things that I love about our field. You know, sustainability, I think everybody who works in sustainability has this understanding that there's no such thing as competition. It's all partnerships. It's all
Yeah.
collaboration because we just don't have time. You know, we don't have time to be competing with each other. We don't have time to be fighting. And the other part is that there's way too much work to be done. Like, you know, we're one organization, but we can't do it all because there's too much that needs to happen. So, you know, some of our biggest quote unquote competitors are actually our biggest allies and partners. I mean, I was on a call last week with Allison Tickell and Heath Lowndes, who's Allison is the CEO at Julie's Bicycle and Heath is the managing director at Gallery Climate Coalition. And if you're looking at it from like a purely business perspective, like those are definitely my two biggest competitors. But that call was all about alignment. It was all about collaboration. It was about how can we support each other? It was, okay, you guys are doing this. We're here to give you these resources to help make that happen. You guys are doing this. Okay, here's my need. And it's so inspiring to be able to work with people who are like that and are just really open and supportive. And you know, we all have the same vision and mission, and consequently, you know, it's just about, okay, how can we most efficiently make this happen? So I think that that's the exciting part about the sustainability world, is that it kind of mitigates the whole competition thing.
So how do you take that bit of magic, the fostering of collaboration, and how do you get cultural institutions to do that and sign up and go, let's forget about our competitors, we're going to work for a greater good?
That's a little harder. That's a great question, and I have to say that's kind of what I'm grappling with right now. You know, it is. I mean, I don't know that museums necessarily see other museums as competition, for example, but there are a few dynamics here. There's a lot of I don't want to say peer pressure, but that might be the best way to put it. There's a lot of like looking at the landscape and seeing, okay, if this museum is doing this, then we have to do that too. No one wants to be the first person to do something in the cultural world,
Yeah.
but once one person does it, everyone needs to jump on board because otherwise you're behind. And so it's really just about getting that first person to do it. And then once that first person does it, then things start to snowball. But I think that, you know, to be honest with you, this comes back to this issue of greenwashing and green hushing. And this is one
Yeah.
of the biggest elements that I think the cultural sector is not very aware of. And I'm trying everything I can to, you know, educate them on this, because this is something that I find really, really important. We all know what greenwashing is, of course. Now, the cultural sector, as you know, public beneficial entities, they're very, very scared of greenwashing. And so they don't talk about their sustainability initiatives. Most museums will not discuss what they're doing behind the scenes to improve their operations.
At
You know,
all.
there's a few exceptions. I'm not going to say that everyone is doing that, but it's very, it's rare. You will most, you know, a lot of museums do not have sustainability pages on their website. They don't talk about it in their PR. It's very still quiet because the problem is that a lot of institutions feel if we're not doing it perfectly, then we can't talk about it.
Yeah.
And I was actually talking to a museum. This was about 5 years ago. So I'm not speaking for them now. I'm speaking for them back then. But I had a conversation with the deputy director, and she told me that the museum had saved 70% on their carbon in the last like 4 years. And I was absolutely shocked by that. I said, that's incredible. Like, that's so impressive. And how did you guys do that? And can we write up a case study? Can we do like a webinar? Like, how can we publicize this? She goes, oh God, no. We are very, very happy to do our part behind the scenes, but we absolutely do not want to talk about this in public. We do not want to mention it. We are just very, no. And I was like, why on earth wouldn't they want to be screaming this from the rooftops? I mean, this is so inspirational.
That's a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can
that's
do
a
your
huge
bit,
part of it. Yeah.
But it's starting a domino effect when you start telling people about it.
Exactly. 100%. I couldn't agree more. The reason that she doesn't want to talk about it is because they accepted money from a fossil fuel company.
Oh, help me.
So this is a classic example of green hushing. And I have to say, I personally, and someone please correct me on this, I think that the cultural sector are the worst green hushers in the world. That's a bold statement. Love you all. I'm here to help you change that. But basically, like, no one's talking about it. And I still talk to PR departments and they're like, well, we're just not comfortable talking about this because of we know how many things we're not doing well. And so we don't want to talk about things we are doing well. And I'm like, but that's green hushing. As you said, it inhibits normalizing sustainability. It stops inspiring other organizations. And that is the most important thing that we have to get over. Like, stop trying to be perfect and let's get loud.
Yeah. And do you think it's a balance of communicating the bad with the good?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that for me, I mean, I'm not going to tell any museum that they need to talk about what they're doing poorly. But what I am going to say is that the best way to handle this, the best way to get over green hushing is to talk about what you're doing well, talk about what your future plans and goals are, and then acknowledge what you don't have solutions for. And who knows? I mean, something really magical could come along, like this museum that saved all this carbon. They can talk about how they did it. They can say, you know, this was really wonderful and we did this and this was super successful. By the way, don't do that. It doesn't work. You know, let's learn from each other's experiences. And then they could say, and, you know, our future plans are that we're going to continue the decarbonization by doing X, Y, and Z. And guys, we're just going to be really blunt about this. We know that we're accepting money from this fossil fuel company. The problem is that they're paying us, you know, 3 million euro a year. And we don't know where that 3 million euro would come from if it weren't for them. And that's in our budget. And we don't want to have to fire everybody or close down. Does anyone have any ideas, solutions? Like, we'd love to get off the fossil fuel line, but we need alternative funding. So help. And then who knows? Maybe, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio is going to come along and be like, hey, I can do that. Here you go. Voila. Like, I mean,
Leo can save all of our days.
I mean, Leo, he saves the world. We love you, Leo. But, you know, it really is just about opening up those conversations and inviting co-creation and solutions.
Yeah. I think that's a great way. So what do you see as the future for cultural institutions heading into their sustainability journey?
That's a great question. You know, when I talk to people in the cultural sector about the future of culture, a lot of times they don't really envision it as being all that different. Most cultural professionals will cite that, you know, there's a really big focus on inclusion, belonging, diversity, equity, this kind of, and also this idea of like co-creation and community engagement. I think a lot of museums are trying to move away from being just houses of collections, more towards, you know, interactive exhibitions and experiences. So I think that that's kind of the trend. What I would like to see is even more of that, even more of this idea of being a place for the community, even more of taking responsibility for our impact on the planet. I think that there's still a lot of things within the cultural sector that don't have solutions right now. Big ones are temporary exhibitions, shipping art all over the world, and you know, just the materials aspect. That, you know, a lot of artists using materials, building exhibitions using materials, like circular economy has just got to be implemented. And I think that's a little bit trickier from a lot of perspectives, but we'll see where that goes. I'm really excited to be delving into some ideas around sustainable transportation. But this is going to take a whole nother level of collaboration, because it's not just going to take collaboration amongst the museums and them agreeing to, you know, play nice together and be friends, but it's going to take collaboration amongst the other stakeholders, including the vendors and suppliers, the packing and shipping companies, and, you know, the manufacturers. And of course, then we're starting to talk about for-profit, we're starting to talk about corporate, and then we do see there's, you know, maybe some competitors who don't want to work together. And but I think that will change. I think that will change very quickly. I'm optimistic.
What advice would you give to cultural institutions looking to start their sustainability journey? What should they do first?
Talk about it. Start talking about it. Start asking about it. Ask your vendors and suppliers, ask your packing and shipping companies, put it into your tenders, put it into your procurement policies, put a statement online saying that you're interested in sustainability. Get loud about it, start talking about it. The other really exciting thing is that you're not alone in this. I mean, I'm around, Julie's Bicycle's around, GCC is around. There are a dozen other organizations globally that are working specifically on supporting the cultural sector and transitioning to be sustainability leaders and advocates. And so, just get started. Make 1 hour a week. That's going to be your sustainability hour. Watch a webinar, go online, do some research, talk to a colleague, whatever it is you want to do. But I think also what's really important is that, we have to look at the balance between individual agency and collective international systemic change.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is that they are not mutually exclusive. It is not possible for us to do this if we don't have both. And I think a lot of times, individuals might think, oh, well, I don't have the agency to do this because I'm just one person. I don't have any buying power. I don't have any decision-making power. So what can I do? And then on the other side, you've got these huge systems that won't move without people moving. So it's really, really important, I think, for us all to look at, no matter where we are, no matter what level, no matter who we are, what change we can make. And it may be as little as putting a recycling program in for your disposable gloves, or it may be changing the face of loan agreements across the globe, but there's always something that can be done. So I think that, asking for help, asking questions, getting curious, and making time for it.
Well, I think you're the shining example of one person can make a big change. So if that's not inspirational, I don't know what is.
You're too kind. Thank you. I'll keep telling myself that.
But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Green Truth Podcast. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and inspiring. Remember, it's through understanding truth and action that we can pave the way for a sustainable future. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe for more thought-provoking conversations, and don't forget to leave us a review. Until next time, stay curious and keep seeking the truth.